Hey everyone, I frequently ask on Patreon for input as to what videos people want to see and look for ideas. One of our members commented that he would like to see some videos on making ambient drones. So I was pretty excited about that, and I immediately went and sat down to make a video on how you could make ambient drones, and I quickly realized that this was just a huge topic and that there was no way I could do it in one or two videos. There's so many different ways to approach it. There's so many fun and interesting techniques, topics, explorations. I really like making videos in series and diving deeper and having each video have a specific focus. So that's what I'm gonna do here. And it's not really gonna be a series, it's gonna be more like a collection of videos, and I'll just keep adding episodes to it occasionally. So many of my videos up to this point have been focused on the Moog Sound Studio, and I still want to keep using those. They are amazing synths and I really love using them. But I also want to start introducing new tools and modules and techniques, and maybe even making ambient from different sound sources like samples or field recordings, loops, noise. But I also want to look to different ambient artists and try to maybe see what we can glean from them and their techniques. So even if you don't have the specific gear that I'm showcasing in these videos, I'm hoping that you can still draw something from it and maybe apply some of the ideas to whatever gear you do have. And if there's one thing that I've really enjoyed about my YouTube experience, it's all the connections I'm making with people online. I love answering questions about my videos. I've been truly humbled by the amount of support I've received, but I'm also really inspired by all the ideas, music, and techniques that you've shared with me. So I encourage all of you to keep asking questions, keep making comments. Let me know you're out there. Many people have emailed me with ideas and patches and just wanting to talk about gear, and I think it's all awesome. And I'd like my Patreon community to develop into a place for sharing ideas, sharing techniques, and learning together. So with all that said, let's make some music together. Today, we're going to talk about the minimalist composer LaMont Young. If you've watched this far in the video, then you're definitely into ambient music and you're interested in making drones. And LaMont Young was kind of the guy who started it all. I was reading about him before I made this video, and I came across a New York Times article where Brian Eno called him the daddy of us all. That's quite an endorsement. He was a leader in avant-garde classical music and modern composition, and specifically drones. He was in that New York scene and hodgepodge with many A-list artists and musicians in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. People like Yoko Ono, Lou Reed, and Andy Warhol. I first learned about Young back when I was in college, and at that time I don't think I could appreciate his work or his influence. Young's beginnings trace back to jazz. He played soprano sax, was what I think he was most famous for. But then in the 50s, he started playing in really unconventional ways and making unconventional compositions and was interested in drones. He made a composition for the piano called the Well-Tuned Piano that was where the piano was tuned in just intonation instead of equal temperament. He would play tones on a saxophone extremely fast, and his thesis was that as listeners, all of that would sort of blend together into a chord. And what might sound like an endless stream of rambling notes was actually quite coherent, and it would sound polyphonic even if it was played on an instrument that was monophonic. So as he continued down this path, he started making compositions rather than based on like musical intervals like we typically talk about them. He was making them on ratios based on the prime numbers and doing all these math calculations. So I've actually got 3 patches or pieces or jams that are inspired by LaMont Young. I'm by no means an expert on him, but I try to take some of the ideas that I read about, take some of the ideas that I heard in his music, and apply them to the Moog Sound Studio. The first one I put out yesterday, and I'm going to explain that patch today on the Subharmonicon. I've also got another one for the Mother 32, and then I'm going to do a different one on the DFAM. Young used to set up all these compositions with sort of rules around them and limitations, and then let the artists perform within that rule set and let them improvise the composition. So I kind of did the same, and I wanted to stick to one synth per piece. So I'm going to get my Subharmonicon set up and explain to you what I did in that jam that I put out yesterday. Alright, so here we are. This is the patch that I have set up. This is what I used in the jam last night to make that ambient drone. But before we get into the Subharmonicon, let's address the issue of reverb. Because of course there was a lot of reverb on the track last night. I'm going to play it for you today without some reverb. But let's talk about what I was using. I was using Valhalla Shimmer Reverb. And I got to admit right from the start, I have kind of a love-hate relationship with shimmer reverbs. There's so many reverbs out there now that almost sound just like synth pads. Even as I recorded that video and I posted it, and then when I listened back to it today, I kind of thought to myself, maybe I overdid the reverb a little bit too much. Although it sounds good, sometimes I feel like I put too much reverb on, or in that other artist put too much reverb on, and you lose a little bit of the character of the synth. And that's, I guess it's debatable whether or not that's okay or not. And, but I think it's important to at least recognize that that's a creative choice that you're making. And when you crank up that mix knob on reverb, just be careful that you're not either losing the character, unless that's something you want to happen, because you are bringing out the character of the reverb. All reverbs have their own character as well. So just that's a creative choice that I just think it's important to be conscious and aware of. Typically with reverbs, I try to keep it on the lower end. These are the settings that I had. And as you can see, the mix was below 30. So, I was aiming to keep it down, but I think it did really color the track. And that's okay. I think it came out okay, but it didn't necessarily allow the Subharmonicon to totally ring out in the way I was expecting. So that's the reverb settings. I'm going to use some different reverbs on the other two tracks. I got a Strymon Big Sky, and then I don't know what I'm going to use for the third track, but I'll use something different. So let's talk real quick about the patching. The patch that I think is really fascinating is the VCA envelope into the VCO2 sub number 1. And if you listen to that, what happens, it's tuned down pretty low. If we crank that, so you're only going to be hearing sub number 1. When you play a trigger, it bounces up, and then it modulates just like turning this knob down. So it's going to kind of cycle through the subdivisions. And it has such a slow attack. I hope you can even hear that. Let me turn the cutoff way up. All that is that the envelope coming from the VCA is modulating that knob. So that's what this patch is doing. The other two, I've got sequence 1 modulating the cutoff, which, there's not that much movement in sequence 1, but it does kind of make it a little bit of movement. I've got sequence 2 influencing the rhythm of number 2, and I've got VCO2 influencing the rhythm of number 3. And I plugged those two in just to kind of make sequencer 2 not be so regular, to kind of jump around a little bit. All right, so let's walk through what I have programmed in here for notes. Well, first of all, I made this to just intonation because that was something LaMont Young was very interested in. And then he would also calculate his tones based on prime numbers. And I think I understand the math, but basically how that works out into notes, it was based on the major seventh, the root note, a minor second, and a major second. So if you were to look on a keyboard, it would be kind of this cluster of notes of, like in the key of C, B, C, C sharp, and D. So that's what I've got programmed in here. I actually don't remember what key I was playing in because I know I've changed these since then, but let's put them back into C. Or I'm just going to actually tune them by ear. It might be C or something, but it doesn't really matter because I just have one an octave below the other and these are staying the same. So that's that same cluster of notes of a root note, a seventh, a minor second, and a major second. And then in sequence 2, it's the same, but I made them slightly different, at different places so that they wouldn't quite line up. And then when you play it all together, I'll set my envelopes to something relatively fast so you can just hear what they sound like. And again, this is without any type of reverb or anything right now. So those are the notes. Those are just the two main oscillators. If I bring in the sub oscillators, that's what it sounds like. So those tones kind of create, what I find really interesting about LaMont Young's work is that, when you think of ambient drones, a lot of times you think about relaxation and something you can kind of fall asleep to, or maybe you can use to study or read something. And with his ambient drones, it doesn't have that effect on me at all. Like it gets my mind racing. I find it energizing. It's the kind of thing that I would want to, be doing the dishes or cleaning the house or something so my mind can wander, but I'm up and moving around. So if I'm sitting down listening to his music, I get really fidgety and I just want to get energized and move. And I think it's just a lot of those dissonant tones kind of going together. So that's what was happening there. And then also, as I mentioned in the intro, he would play these notes super fast and kind of have them all blend in together. And so that's why for much of the video, I had the tempo cranked up. So and if we increase our delays and turn down our envelope, increase our decays, you can bring up the resonance so you can actually highlight specific tones with the cutoff. Maybe even bring the envelope into negative territory. Because what that resonance does when you crank it up is whatever tone the cutoff is on is raised up a lot. So we have this sort of blend of colors going together in this really dissonant area, and we can use the cutoff to actually tune which specific note we want to ring out over the others. And so then if you turn it down, it kind of brings out the lower end. They sort of blend together a little bit more. So throughout the performance on the jam, what I was doing was playing with my mixer to bring out certain tones. If I wanted more low end, I would bring out the subs. If I wanted more high end, I would bring up the VCOs. And I was also playing with the resonance level and the cutoff amount. And if you had more than just the Subharmonicon, you could set all kinds of modulations to do this if you had a modular system or even just the whole sound studio together. But this was one of those things where, like I said in the intro, I wanted to set this as a limitation because that forced me to stay engaged with the sound rather than just sort of turning it on and letting the video run and just kind of walking away. I had to get in there and actually modulate the cutoff and the resonance and all of these by hand and sort of improvise my way through it. And as I did that, I did lower down the tempo because when it's cranked this high, that VCO2 doesn't come in. So I wanted to make sure to have that play in a little bit. And so let's hear what that sounds like. And again, there's no reverb at all right now. See, it's really great when you can get those tones to kind of match up with the sequence. You can kind of create some harmonies. But they sound really dissonant. Turning up the envelope. Let's turn it down to negative territory. Okay, and so just for fun, I'm going to play just about, with the reverb, I'll put it at a mix of 10 at this level. And we'll let that settle in for a minute. Now notice since the sequencer is modulating the cutoff too, that's kind of changing that tone of the resonance. Alright, so let's bring the reverb up to 20 now. And I'm going to speed it up. And that is my first patch inspired by LaMont Young's work on the Subharmonicon. So I hope you enjoyed this and got some fun ideas. I hope you try it out with whatever synth you have, whether or not it's a sub or something else. But I'm going to release another one with the Mother 32, and I'll do the same type of walkthrough, and then I'll do another one with the DFAM, do the same type of walkthrough, and then I'll probably jump onto a different artist or a different technique or something, and I'm just going to kind of release ambient, soundscape, and drone videos as I go along. So if you like this kind of stuff, make sure to like and subscribe. Check out my Patreon page. I'm going to document this patch, and I'll get it in my Subharmonicon patch book up on Patreon. I'd love to have you. I love making connections with people, so definitely reach out, whether or not it's in the comments or on Patreon or email, Instagram, whatever. Let me know you're there. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.